Okay, so from where do we learn to count the Omer? From where do we learn to count the Omer? Well, very simply, it's right there in the Sefer, in Sefer Vayikra, which we are in right now in our Torah reading. Usfartem lechem mimocharat haShabbat miyom haviachem et Omer hatanufa sheva Shabbatot tamimot tihiena. And from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count off 7 weeks. Now, I must pause here for a moment to make sure that we all know that when we say the word Sabbath, we're not talking about Shabbat. The rabbis understood this to mean the second day of Pesach. Don't ask me at this moment how they knew that and why they interpreted it as such. But remember, most importantly, that this is part of the harvest festival. And so this is what, in biblical times, one is instructed to do. On the day after the second day of Pesach, you're going to count off 7 weeks, and then you're going to have a new barley harvest. So then it goes on to say, in Macharat HaShabbat, HaShvi'it, Tisbru Chamishim Yom. So they must be complete. You count off 7 weeks, and you must count until the day after the 7th week, which makes dam barabam chamishim yom, 50 days. And what do you do then? Hikraftem mincha chadasha ladonai. You bring an offering of new grain to Yud Hey Vav Hey. So importantly, what is this teaching us is that this is a sacrifice that you're going to make. You're going to come to the temple and you're going to offer this offering of new grain. That is the first of your harvest. Okay? So, this counting, wait a second. How do we get from the harvest to the counting? Okay, well, actually, it's good. I'm counting ahead. I'm looking a little bit ahead. How do we get from counting these 50 days of the beginning of the harvest to the counting of the Sfirot? Well, that comes much, much later, post-biblical times, in medieval times, when it turns the Kabbalists turn this on its head and make it a spiritual journey to inner psycho-spiritual journey. Okay, but back to the actual counting itself. Abaye said in Masechet Menachot in the Talmud, it is a mitzvah to count days, and also a mitzvah to count weeks. As we'll see later when we do our counting, that we're not only counting the days, but we're also counting the weeks. The Gemara notes that, in fact, the sages of the study hall of Rav Ashi counted days and they also counted weeks. Okay. So they made sure that they did both of those. Why? In order to cover their bases. But Amemar counted days but not weeks. What was his explanation for only counting the days? In other words, he would say, 10 days, but he wouldn't say 1 week and 3 days, which is what our practice now is. And he said, because there's no longer an Omer offering, the counting is performed only in commemoration of the temple. Therefore, one does not have to be so machmir, so scrupulous to count both days and weeks. So, drum roll, how do you think it turned out? We do both, right? Which is often the case. We know how to add things, so that's a pun intended, but we don't take things away once we've added them to our rituals, to our minhag, to our traditional way of doing things. Okay, but why do you do it? Right? Why don't we just do it every Shabbat and count and for the whole week? Or why doesn't just one person do it and then we all say amen or whatever? Okay. Well, there's even a teaching for that, and that's in the same Masechet Menachot the sages taught in a Baraita. The phrase "and you shall count for you" usfartem lachem teaches that the mitzvah of counting is not a communal obligation. Rather, there should be a counting by each and every person. So while it says lachem, and lachem is a plural word, right? Lachem means you and you and you and me and me and me. It means all of us, one by one, each of us. Kol echad. Okay? So I want to stop there just to make sure I haven't lost anybody, because now we're really going to get confusing. We all good for now? All right. I know this is a review for many of you. Again, I just wanted to make sure that we're all starting together in the same place. So you're going to recognize this next image. What is it? Of course, it is the 10 Sfirot. The 10 Sfirot, starting with Keter, which is the highest Sfira, and then Bina and Chochmah. Keter, Bina, Chochmah. Cha, Bina, Chochmah. Now, sometimes Keter is Da'at. There's different ways of labeling these that the rabbis use, but here in our model, it's Keter. Now, you'll see on the right, under Chochmah, you have Chesed, which is the week that we're on. Now, how come we're not starting with either Keter or Chochmah and Bina? It's because we start with the 7 lower Sfirot, all right, which happens to be a Sfira from the same Shoresh as the counting, right? So the Sfirot is an accounting of how the mystics saw the pattern of reality. Okay. What are these listed things? Chesed, Gevurah, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, finally Shekhinah. I see them as energy. Oh gosh, they're like, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? It's because Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, our Creator, Harachmana, the compassionate one, placed power limiters. There's a word for it that I'm not thinking of right now. But they have the ability to keep all of the power of the mainframe rushing into reality at the same time. It's a capacitor, right? It's holding off in different ways and yet infusing reality with these different characteristics, these different senses, these different feelings, these different powers, really, that are part and parcel to who we are as well. So we can see this as a great image of God. And since we are made in the image of God, we are hoping through these next 7 weeks to open to these sphero, to open to these capacities, understand where we lack and where we fulfill the power of them, and do some work on integrating them into our lives. When I look at this as the Sfirot, I see a cosmic pinball machine, which is basically what it is, right? If you shoot that pinball to the top, it's going to shoot down any one of there you go, Vera, any one of those passageways. And know that in each one of these passageways, there are 10 other passageways. And within each one of the midot, of each one of the sfirot, there are a multiplicity of 10, because all of the sfirot are multiplied within each of the sfirot. Is your head exploding yet? There you go, Dan. So there we have each of them playing one against the other. It's all happening at the same time. Everywhere, everything is happening all at once. And as each of these energies bounce off of the other, that's where we have to maintain a sense of balance. Dan Glazer, our first question for the night.
Just a quick question. We don't do the upper 3 because they're not emanations about the reality. They're above reality.
Yeah, that's okay way of saying it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and they are in a way not as accessible to us as the lower sfirot. right? They remain in some manner above, to use your language, above reality, right? So the seven lower sphirot are the sphirot that, what happened there? Okay. The lower sphirot are the sphirot that permeate, they flow into reality as we know it. And when we say mimale kol olmim, that God's presence fills all creation, we're talking about those seven sphirot, right? V'sovev kol olmim, and surround all creation, those seven plus the remaining three, right? And I'm going to stop there before I hurt myself. Okay? Alrighty. The counting of the Omer, Sfirat HaOmer, became associated with the Sfirot through medieval Kabbalistic traditions that sought to turn the 49-day agricultural and historic interval between Pesach and Shavuos into a 7-week spiritual refinement process, mapping several lower Sfirot to the 7 weeks. What was going to be the things that we want to concentrate on, that they're giving over to us? First of all, the structure. The Kabbalists, particularly with Lurianic tradition, associated the 49 days. How do we get 49? Of course, 7 weeks times 7 days is 49. With the 7 lower sphirot, we just referred to that, Chesed through Malchut. That's the structure of our counting. On a weekly and daily focus, each of the 7 weeks is dedicated to one of the 7 sphirot, and each day within that week is dedicated to a sub-attribute. Right? So, for example, Chesed, loving kindness within Chesed on the first day, and Gevura, severity within Chesed on the second day, and so on and so forth. Until we reached today, which is Yesod Shebechesed. And tonight will be, oh, I can't say that yet. Finally, what is the purpose according to the Kabbalists? And of course, later on the Hasidim. This practice is designed to harmonize the divine attributes within oneself. There we go again, right? We're made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of all of this, allowing for personal spiritual growth and purification as one prepares to receive Torah at Sinai on Shavuot, elevating us from a state of impurity to purity. And that, my friends, is an entirely different teaching. Dan Glazer, question number 2.
So you may have said this, but I missed it. Before the Kabbalists put on the Sfirot and the 7 by 7, the only thing that was really done with this, with the 49 days, the Omer, was counting towards something with no other meaning or no other kavanot?
After the destruction of the temple, whether or not the counting continued, I'm not quite sure between that period. I suspect that there was still a counting because we are instructed to count, but the part that we could not do any longer was bring the offering. But we still could count. But there's a good question, Dan. Let's meet somewhere over coffee and find the answer to that. So let's get to Lurianic Kabbalah, right? Let's underscore that a little bit more by turning to our master here, which is Rabbi Isaac Luria, of blessed memory, also known as the Ari, the lion, who was a rabbi and mystic in Sfat, where all the cool things happened. His teachings are referred to as Lurianic Kabbalah, and he taught the following story. Somebody want to read it? Then I will. Before God created the world, the entire universe was filled with a holy presence. I'm going to interrupt myself. See, that's what you get for not volunteering to read. I wouldn't interrupt you. The entire universe was filled with a holy presence before God created the world. Think in the Kedusha when we say the words of Isaiah, right? Melo chol haaretz kavodo. All of God's presence fills creation. Right? Melo chol haaretz. God took a breath to draw back, also known as what? Tzimtzum, to make room for the world. I guess God was lonely. God wanted to be in relationship. I'm adding my own commentary here. From that first breath, darkness was created. And when God said, Vayihi or, let there be light, lightness was created filling vessels. Sfirot. Another meaning of sfirot, with holy light. So imagine this, picture this. If you will, we have 7 lower sfirot. These are vessels filled with light, each with this particular power. And when those vessels to the world, when God sent those vessels to the world, and if they had each arrived, something got left out. God sent the vessels to the world and they created, they cracked because of the intense power of the energy emanating from within the vessel. If only they had arrived whole, the world would have been perfect. You really got to lend your holy imagination to this, right? Lend what Reb Zalman of blessed memory would call our spiritual enchantment, right? To hold this in our heart, mind, right? But the holy light was too powerful and they split open, sending sparks flying everywhere. Sparks flying everywhere. And some of God's holy light became trapped inside the shards of the vessels. It's our job to release and gather the sparks. What is that called? Tikkun Olam, right? So it's kind of like a misunderstanding of Tikkun Olam. However, a work to repair the world in the ways we commonly understand it certainly could reclaim those sparks and gather them together. It's our job to gather the sparks. When enough sparks have been gathered, Tikkun Olam, repair of the world, will be complete. How do we gather the sparks? By doing mitzvot, tzedakah, and acts of gimilut, chasadim. There's the word chesed, acts of loving kindness. So I want to get to Olam Chesed Yibaneh, which we chant a lot. Where does it come from? Psalm 89, verse 3. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, the world will be built by Chesed. For those of you who don't know Rabbi Simon Jacobson, you should. Google him, an amazing teacher of Kabbalah. And he has an Omer counting calendar that I bought years and years ago. It was the very first one that I bought when I was introduced to this practice. Chesed, what is chesed? It's loving kindness, or benevolence. He goes on to say that love is the single most powerful and necessary component in life. Love is the origin and foundation of all human interactions. It is both giving and receiving, just like the word itself, natan, which is a palindrome, spelled backwards and forwards the same, meaning giving and receiving. It allows us to reach above and beyond ourselves. That's love, to experience another person and to allow that person to experience us as love. It's a tool by which we learn to experience the highest reality, which is Yud He Vav He. Chesed helps us to be enthusiastically present in each other's lives and make meaningful contact despite the temptation to stay in the safe confines of our own lives. Wouldn't you say that one needs to love in order to listen to another human being fully, being fully present? I think so. No, Dan? I agree with you. Well, I'll talk to Mary Rita about that. Back to another Chesed teaching, because I want to make sure that you've got all of these before we jump into the work that we've been doing all week. From Pirkei Avot, Shimon HaTzadik, Haya, Misharei Knesset Hagadola, Hu Haya Omer. So he was from the last part of the men of the Great Assembly. Haya Omer, he would say, Al shlosha davarim ha'olam omed. Al ha'torah, ve'al ha'avodah, ve'al gemilut chasadim. Al ha'torah, ve'al ha'avodah, ve'al gemilut chasadim. On 3 things the world stands. On the Torah, on service and on acts of chesed, on acts of loving kindness. So we're in pretty good shape here to begin our journey, except I need to tell a story before we get there for one more deep dive into Chesed, our week's midah. From Avot the Rabbi Natan, he asked the question, how do we know the significance of acts of Chesed? How do we know that when we do an act of kindness, that it has any kind of ripple effect on anything or anyone? As the prophet Hosea said, for I desire acts of chesed and not sacrifice. Ooh, what else substituted for sacrifice? Prayer, of course. So now we have avodah v'gimilut chasadim and al haTorah v'yala avodah. All three of those things. The world stands like a three-legged stool. A story. Once it happened that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was leaving Jerusalem. He was leaving Jerusalem, and Rabbi Yeshua was walking after him. He saw the ruins of Solomon's temple. Rabbi Yeshua said, "Oi." Well, I don't know he said "Oi," but he said something to that effect. What a devastation for us that the place where Israel atoned for our sins has been destroyed. And Rabbi Yochanan replied, "My son, do not fear. We have another form of atonement that is just as effective." What is it? Acts of chesed. This is what the verse of Hosea means when it says, "For I desire acts of chesed and not sacrifice." And so, we should know that when we do an act of loving kindness, it is just as if, ki'ilu, as if we brought a sacrifice to the temple. We're sacrificing of ourselves to make this world worthy of each other and our children. I'm going to take a breath here. And as my father of blessed memory would say, after drinking something. So we're working with this book. And I have been looking and working with it all week. And I have found some of it challenging, some of it whimsical, some of it, I'm not drawn to artistic things. I didn't mean that as a pun. But I know there were some things in there that asked us to draw. But this was something I did find to be relatively challenging. And it was today's, actually, mindfulness in action. Oh, this wasn't the one I found challenging. This is the one, actually, I found very, very timely. I'll tell you which one I found challenging, too. And then I'm going to ask you for your thoughts on the work that you did, or some of you who received the workbook did this week. Reflect on a new experience you've had with a loved one. Then it goes on to say perhaps you cooked a new recipe together, went somewhere neither of you had been before, or read a new book together. Notice how this novel experience deepened your existing bond. If you can't think of one that's meaningful, plan a new experience for the future. So I just want to share with you, before I open up the room to your thoughts and some of your experiences with working with this workbook this week. And I also want to say some things about the book itself. Some of you know that Renee and I went to Colorado for the Siddharam. And the first night we spent with my brother-in-law, and we also went for the wedding of my nephew, Joe. And we had a lovely first night Seder. It was a very small Seder, and our daughter Mo flew in from Northampton, Massachusetts, to join us for both Seder and Simcha. The next morning, I woke up not feeling well. Let's just say that I had so much gas I felt I was going to explode. That went on through the day. It had dissipated by the time second Seder. And this second Seder I was so excited to be at. Many of you know our friend, of course, Janice Rubin, who was at Janice's house in Boulder. Judith Dack was there, Rabbi Eva Sachs-Boulder and her husband Larry, and Rabbi Mark Soloway and his new bride, Rachel. And I've really looking forward to meeting Mark. I had met him years ago, and he was looking forward to meeting me and spending Seder with me as well. And right around Kiddush, so we're talking about early in the Seder, I said, I have to apologize, but I have to leave and go downstairs. I can't stay at the Seder. Well, over the next 24 hours, I believe I had the Nova virus, which included so many bodily functions behaving badly that I'm not going into it. I have not been that sick in a very long time. I don't think our daughter Mo has ever seen me that sick. It took me until the day before we left to recover from how sick I was. In the meantime, Renee, her asthma acted up on her. And so she got sick as well. Luckily, on the day before we left, we had made arrangements to go to Glenwood Springs, Colorado, on the good word of our friend Ginny and Batya, where there's a most delicious hot springs. And we sat in the hot springs, and we slowly recovered and started to come to ourselves, back to ourselves. So when this mindfulness in action asked me to reflect on a new experience you've had with a loved one, well, and then went on to list positive experiences, this was what came to mind. How Renee and I nursed each other through our respective battles with health, and how she especially helped me through this awful health experience that I had. And at the end of it all, you know how love grows sometimes going through these kinds of challenges? Lucinda, I know you had surgery recently, and how Oren was there for you, and how each and every one of us has been there for someone, and how someone has been there for us at various times in our lives. So I want to share that with you, of something that I found meaningful this week. And also, I not just admitting, but I am readily receiving that the way that my love for Renee just grew these past few days. And you think that after 33 years of marriage, there's no more love can fill, it's also already a kosher vaya. Well, that's not true. So I'd like to ask a pointed question here. First of all, of course, this assumes that you did some of the work this week. First of all, any thoughts that you have about the workbook? But more personally, is there anything that you found challenging? Is there anything that you learned? A particular exercise or meditation that spoke to you, and why? And perhaps you want to fill in the blank. I learned, yada, yada. I was challenged by. Oh, the thing I was challenged by was that invitation to write a letter to someone who I haven't been in contact with. That was challenging. Okay, I see Mary Rita's hand. Mary Rita, you going to start us off? Thank you. You are muted. You are muted.
Okay, I got it. Um, I liked how realistic and um, down to earth the language was, the examples were. It was as if the person who was creating this um, really worked to make it as accessible, like to each of us in different ways. I loved, you know, some of the things suggesting I didn't do a lot of the work. I just went through the workbook and I thought, oh, I love the way they phrase this. I love the way they're doing. I love the way they're doing that. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I'm going to double down on something you said, how accessible it is, and how they don't. It's a lovely introduction. So make sure you read the introduction, especially if this is all new to you. Okay, um, but it's deceivingly simple, but doing the work, it will take us to some deep places, I think. Anna L.
I didn't see the email or the downloads, so I can't answer anything related to that. But I can relate to some challenges that from November till about February, we didn't have running water in our house. And that was really challenging. And then we had the challenge of having to pay for this very expensive new well to be drilled. And then after that, to have stones put in because they and was just so challenging. And I will have to say that my husband and I worked together pretty well, not perfectly, but pretty well, trying to support each other through the whole thing. And what I finally want to say is that I have this new morning practice of the sun comes in from a window high up in my great room, and that's our only room down here besides our bedroom. I stay in front of that window and I absorb the sun. And sometimes I take pictures like this so that I personally can get the healing of the sunlight and then share whatever light has come into me and in some way hope that it goes out to heal other people as well.
Thank you. A healing light. Anyone else?
I'll say something, Mark. I use the workbook as a jumping off place because some of it resonated and some of it didn't. And I wanted to use my medium, which was writing, and I wanted to write something each day that represented to me what the combination of attributes was. So I did that. And then, for example, the thing that you had mentioned about writing a letter. Well, you know, I wrote a letter to one of my dear friends who passed away several years ago. So I used the form of the letter, but I took it in the way that I felt was most meaningful. And she was the person who most articulated or most emanated like Chesed Sheba Chesed. And so I just wrote her a poem that was using a letter form that they had suggested, but in the way that I felt was the most meaningful. So I thought that for me worked the best.
Bingo. Using the workbook as a jumping off point. It's beautiful how we can take advantage of the collective wisdom here in this Zoomagogue. Yes, absolutely. If there's something in there that speaks to you more than other modalities, for instance, like when I shared with you, doing artwork is not something that I'm drawn to. If I'm in a workshop and asked to, I certainly will do it. It's not like I'm allergic to it, but it's not part of my regular practice. So, and this workbook does call upon us to do some work with, craft work, etc. But you can use the ideas to sit down with a pen and paper. And I would suggest actually, what do you use, Lucinda? Do you sit down or do you do it on compute with a pen and paper on paper? Do you?
Well, I was doing the writing on my computer, and I usually don't do artistic work either, but I took a journal and I said, okay, I'm going to do it because they're suggesting that I do it. And I tried to see what the movement was in Chesed that my body was taking me to, because I like doing things that are embodied. And I said, wow, I was going around in a circle and a spiral, and then it went out. And I said, yeah, that makes sense to me. That's what Chesed is. It's like, using this love energy inside and then just giving it out to the world. So I found that the art really helped me understand it better.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm not going to be as resistant in the coming days and weeks to it. Marlena.
Lucinda, you just inspired me, which is why my hand went up as you were finishing. So every day Miera sends out about 2 sentences that encapsulate the 2 attributes, and they're vivid with imagery. Wildflowers and beautiful things that are easy to imagine in your mind's eye. And listening to Lucinda, I thought to myself, I'm sitting and imagining anyway. I'm seeing words and making it real in my mind. I could take color and superimpose her words. I don't even have to be original, but I could take color and make it into something that becomes sort of an embodied soulful experience, because it becomes sort of felt, and then it has the originality of what I would bring to it as I see it, and color it and bring it out. So yeah.
Beautiful. And a beautiful example of immersing yourself in a process that arose for you, inspired by Meira's prompts, which, how perfect is that? Okay. So again, using the workbook as a jumping off place, getting on other people's, but I would suggest don't get on too many email lists. Because you'll be so inundated with things that it'll just feel like over the top. Oh, I can't do all of that. Just do a little bit. Anybody else have something to add? Meira.
I've been counting the Omer Kabbalah style for a number of years, and what I love about it is that every day has a different essence, a different little special thing to discover about it. And I haven't done it the same way twice. One year I had a notebook, and I am not at all artistic, but I drew something for each day, which was like mind-bending for me, and nothing to look at, mind you, but it was the experience of trying to put in imagery what I was feeling about the day. So I think however you decide to approach it, it's just really worthwhile, because it makes every day special, and I'm grateful for that. And by the way, my challenge for myself this year is 14 words or less to describe the essence of the day. And I call it a nugget, and it doesn't take more than a minute to read it. So you don't have to worry about getting my email.
Excellent. Excellent. And just curious about those of you who have made this a practice over time. How long do you spend on the work? And Mary Rita, how long do you spend each day?
It could be 2 hours. It could be more. It was more today because I was also writing something on NetSock, and I spent a lot of time just kind of sitting and letting it soak in. And I went to the workbook and just went to the NetSock chapter and just let different parts of it soak in, and then came back and did some writing. So sometimes it can be like 3 hours.
So, not to intimidate anyone.
It's not all writing, you know, because
I do
like
not
some
spend 3 hours.
But sometimes you can do it. There are days that I can do it in 5 minutes. Like the
Yes.
one that went out today was 5 minutes. All I had to do was find a picture and another thing and make a blessing, and it came out. Mary Rita's is so comprehensive. It's a magnificent opus, each and every one. And they really take a long time to read, not just for her to do, but then you have them and you can dwell upon all those images, both her pictures and her writing, and pair that with my good friend Meira and the
Oh, I
little
love the nuggets.
you know, and you know, we all have our own creative way of processing this. So this has been my 5th year, and every time I do it differently. I've done it with fiber art pieces. I have one in front of me that I'm working on. I do it with necklaces, headpieces, branches, and now photos. And it's like the energy, Mark. You said it. It's like you feel the energy and it comes through, and then how does it get expressed? And to me, sometimes, like I said, it could be 5 minutes, and sometimes it's hours. And time flies when you're doing this kind of stuff. Time doesn't exist. I will say that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Nice. It's almost akin, I would say, to Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, to place Yud He Vavi before you always. So this is an intentional, if anything, our spiritual, tradition is an intentional one. Saying a bracha, a blessing, is bringing intentionality to eating or whatever it is we happen to be doing. So now we're bringing in intentionality in a little different way. Using prompts that coincide with the 7 times 7, culminating to bring us to Shavuot and receiving Torah, looking to what I referred to before as purifying the soul. So if we, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, is the only one in all of Torah who is spoken of as speaking to God panim el panim, face to face, right? Every aspaklaria is a very unusual word that's used in the Talmud, that it is a clear mirror. Now, none of us has that. We have schmutz on our windshields that we go through life, right, trying every which way to cleaning those windshields off. And as soon as one side is clean, the other side is dirty. Maybe there are moments of clarity that we can see, not just into I'm not going to go into the truth of the universe. Let's say into the truth of this moment of what I need to do with my life and what teaching I need to give over, and what I need to make for dinner, for God's sake, right? Or how I can clean up my little portion of the world. So this is what we're working on, just in small pieces, to clean our individual windshields. And then who knows, maybe Mashiach will arrive someday. We were just invited Eliyahu to the Seder, and Mashiach will herald the day when the entire windshield of reality will be clear, and we'll all Vayom hahu yeheh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Okay. Anybody else something to share? And then we're going to count, because I don't know where everybody on Eastern time, but most of you are. You don't have to count with me if it's not time for that. I didn't begin counting the Omer, oh boy, sometime after I met Renee. I think it was before I started rabbinical studies. I just found out that it was the thing. My conservative Jewish background, counting the Omer, is like, I didn't know anything from Chassidut, right? And I didn't know, maybe, I don't know of anybody who did it. It was a whole foreign thing. Then, of course, when I fell in with my Jewish renewal crowd, all of a sudden, the Hasidic, psycho-spiritual part of it, this makes sense. This is something I can work with and something that can feel important. So from the very beginning, I chanted the first paragraph of the that were given to before the actual bracha to counting the Omer. And it was basically a sing-song, so on and so forth. But of course, Rabbi Shir Yaakov and those delicious friends of his created a beautiful, beautiful melody for this that we'll use. And I hope let's all the leaders will count on counting, towards the end of the next 6 weeks, each night you lead. So we have an opportunity to do that together. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you, which has the lyrics. Those, of course, are not the lyrics, but there's a little, some grain. Okie dokie. If you know the melody, sing it with me. If you don't know it, sing it with me. L'shem yichud kudsha brichu u'shechintei Hinani muchan u'mazuman L'kayem mitzvat ta'aseh Shel sfirat ha'omer Shel sfirat ha'omer Shel sfirat ha'omer Shel sfirat ha'omer. For the sake of the unification of the Holy Blessed One, divine transcendence and Shekhinah, divine immanence, here I am, Hineni, prepared and ready to do the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Sheva Shabbatot Timimot tihena Sheva Shabbatot Timimot tihena Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. I'm going to repeat that, and I want to invite you to sing this with me because it's for lachem, for each of us to do. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer al sfirat ha'omer al sfirat ha'omer al sfirat ha'omer. Hayom Shiv'a Yamim Shehem Shavua Echad Ba'Omer. Today is the 7th day, making 1 week of the Omer, or the Homer, as they like to say in Bart's brand. Yai da 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 da.